When people hear the word PlayStation 2, they automatically think of the classics like Ratchet and Clank, Kingdom Hearts, and Grand Theft Auto. But a lot of times what they don't think of are the awesome launch titles, and this game is no exception. It's Dark Cloud for Sony PlayStation 2. Dark Cloud is a JRPG action-adventure dungeon crawler town builder released in 2001 by Level 5 Games. And boy, did they do a good job. The game starts out with Colonel Flag of the East seeking to awake the Dark Genie so that he can control the world. He awakes the Genie and orders him to attack the West, but before he completely destroys everything, Simba the Fairy King casts a spell that puts all the villagers and their possessions into orbs called Atla. And now, since the main character of the game survived the attack, it's up to you to find the orbs and restore peace to the town. How do you find the orbs? By exploring the nearby dungeon. This game has many different dungeons, and they are all unique in their own way. The thing they all share in common is each dungeon floor is randomly generated. That means you could replay the floor you just left, and the layout would be completely different, giving the game some replayability. You'll encounter many different things on each floor, from enemies to chests to literally nothing, because sometimes rooms won't generate anything. In order to advance to the next floor, you'll need a key. You obtain the key by defeating enemies. You never know which enemy it'll be. It could be the first enemy you encounter or the last enemy you encounter, so you really can't rush through the dungeon. But you don't really want to because you should use every enemy to upgrade your weapons. Unlike other RPGs, this game focuses on upgrading your weapons. You start out with a basic dagger, and along the way find other weapons that are much stronger and easier to upgrade. You can find weapons inside of chests, buy weapons, or build your current weapon into a stronger weapon. You have to be careful when using your weapon though, because weapons have health in this game, and if it gets too low when fighting an enemy, you will break it. All that time you spent upgrading and building it up is gone. Once a weapon is broken, that weapon is completely gone. There's a lot that goes into weapon upgrades that I'm not too good at explaining, so we're going to hand it over to my good friend Komineku and have him help us out.
Like what Retro said, the only real way to get stronger in this game is by leveling up and upgrading your weapons. To start, each character has their own unique weapon, varying from swords, slingshots, a staff, and heck, even a gun. Or a blaster? Whichever. But each weapon, stat-wise, operates basically the same. The main stats are as follows. Attack, how much base physical damage you do. Endurance, which affects how much weapon health you lose every time you attack an enemy. Speed, how quickly you can strike again. Magic, how much base magic damage you'll deal. And weapon health, which is essentially your weapon's durability. In this game, all weapons can break and will be lost forever. The only exceptions to this are the very first weapons you start with. Next, the elemental stats, which work in opposites. Fire is effective to ice, ice is effective to fire, thunder effective to wind, wind, thunder. And last, holy, which is effective against any undead monster and evil monsters. Also, you can only have one element active at a time, and only if the weapon has at least 1 point on it. Example, I have a weapon with 10 fire points and 10 wind points. Everything else is 0. So I can only activate fire or wind, but not both. So think carefully about which elements you want to have active and at what times, because having the right elements can really help you do that extra bit of damage you need to finish off whatever you're fighting. And lastly, anti-stats, which are as follows. Dragon, Undead, Marine, Rock, Plant, Beast, Sky, Metal, Mimic, and Mage. The higher the number on one of these, the more bonus damage you can deal to each monster of a specific type. I won't really go into these because I think they're pretty self-explanatory. And now, actually upgrading your weapons. There are two ways to get stronger weapons, leveling them up and building them up. Leveling up a weapon is pretty simple. Just fight monsters to increase the weapon you're using's abs, and aka experience, and once you've maxed the weapon's abs, you can then proceed to level it up. Or, if you have any, you can use power-up powder, which instantly levels up your weapon, with the experience you need to do so. When your weapon levels up, of course, it gets some stat boosts, but if you want to make it stronger faster and increase specific stats more, adding attachments before you level up is important. More on that later. Next is building up weapons. This can be a bit tricky and confusing at first, but it's definitely the best way to make stronger weapons. In fact, if you want the strongest weapons in the game, it's the only way to get them. In order to build up a weapon into a new one, you have to increase specific stats which are marked in red on the build-up menu until they become white. Once you've done that, the question marks it showed previously will change to the name of the weapon you can build up into. And how do you increase specific stats, you might ask? If you remember me mentioning earlier, it's attachments. Attachments are little medallion-like things you can add to your weapons before you level them up, which add to any given stat it says, i.e. attack, anti-beast, magic, or whatever. And once you level up a weapon, the add-ons fuse into your weapon permanently. On a side note, the amount of attachments you can have on a weapon varies from weapon to weapon. Some have 2 slots, others 5. It should also be noted that because the attachments fuse permanently, you should make sure to have the attachments you're sure you want to fuse before doing so. Another great way to get some serious stat boosts is to status break a weapon. You can do this once a weapon is at least at level 5. Status breaking essentially takes a weapon and turns it into an attachment that you can put on other weapons, making it gain all the stat power of the previous one. However, you can only have one status broken weapon at a time, and the status broken weapon only keeps 60% of its original stats, meaning it's not quite as strong as it originally was, but don't let that discourage you. 60% power is still quite a lot. Doing this, I've been able to make some pretty powerful weapons. This is a pretty interesting and fun system to use once you get the hang of it. My only real complaint is that I wish they would tell you how much more you needed to increase a given stat before you can build it up, making it a bit of a guessing game.
Along with weapon health, you also have to worry about your own health too. You and your party members that you pick up along the way all have certain health bars. One for health, one for thirst, and one for weapon health. You can recover all of these with buyable repair items. However, it's best not to die in a dungeon if you can, because if you don't have any stand-in powder to switch to another party member, you will be forced to leave the dungeon and half your money. Definitely not cool. Throughout the game, you find a total of 5 party members, and they all have their own different playstyles. Some of them fight close range, and others fight far range, and they all have their own unique weapons as well. As you progress through the game, you'll come across certain obstacles in a dungeon that require a specific character to move forward in the dungeon. This can range from jumping over a gap, to opening a door, or blowing black smoke out of the way. They really want you to use every character, and you really should upgrade everyone's weapons the best you can, because you could advance to the next floor in a dungeon, and without warning automatically be switched to a different character, and be forced to only use him or her on that floor. So weapon upgrading is very important. You can also enter a floor that has other restrictions, like getting thirsty quicker, or not being able to change your current equipped weapon. But when it comes to characters, let's see if Komineku can give us any more insight.
In total, you have 6 playable characters in the game. Each can be named by the player if you so choose, but they have their own default names if you don't want to. The first of which is the main character. You start off with him, of course. He is a young boy named Town. If you couldn't already tell, his name is a bit of a play on words, as you'll be rebuilding various towns. His weapon of choice is daggers and swords, and he's one of the few characters that can strike multiple times in succession. The first additional member to join Town on his quest is a stray cat named Zhao, turned human for, reasons. Her main weapon is a slingshot, which has a fair amount of range, but does more damage the closer you are. She's great against flying enemies, and has a decent rate of fire. With her in your party, you can jump over specific gaps. In the next town, a young forest dweller named Goro will join up with you. He is the sole survivor of the Dark Genie attack on his village. Eventually, after finding out the truth of what happened to his father, he joins your group. He uses hammers and axes and can deal quite a lot of damage. The main downside with him, however, is his attacks are pretty slow and have super short range. He is also able to open doors that have a peg in front of them. Next, a genie called Ruby, but this one's good, I promise. After hearing how there's a genie who is stronger than her and is ruining the reputation of genies, she decides to help you defeat the Dark Genie. The weapons she uses are rings. With them, she can use various types of magic, and she can also charge up her attacks for more power. She's also able to open doors locked by gems. All in all, a great magic damage dealer with good range. Next, from a village in the desert, is Ungaga, a warrior full of pride that has since left him after his village was destroyed by the Dark Genie. After some consoling by an NPC named Theo, Ungaga regains his will to fight and joins you. His specialty weapons are spears and polearms. The barriers that he gets rid of are a strange black fog, which he gets rid of by twirling his staff to create a gust of wind. His main defining trait is his range because he uses polearms. But other than that, he doesn't really have a whole lot going for him. He's not a particularly strong character, and he's not very fast either. All in all, he's a pretty average physical damage dealer. And lastly, but certainly not least, Osmond, a tech whiz, rabbit-like guy. He's one of the moon people, and he joins you to help you win a fight at the Colosseum so you can get a part to help him make a giant golem called the Sun Giant that he's been working on. After getting him, he almost makes Zhao obsolete, because not only is he able to fly over large gaps, but he also uses guns and blasters. Overall, he's definitely one of the best characters in the game because of his range and rate of fire. Not to mention, he's the only character who can move independently of his attacks.
After finding the orbs scattered throughout the dungeon floors, you can now start rebuilding the town or village. You can technically arrange things however you want, but in order to progress through the game, everyone's house needs to be placed in certain locations. Placing everything in the right spot will also give you awesome items as well. The only way to know where to put things is to talk to the people you've rescued in the orbs. This game is big on interacting with town people, and that's okay because everyone has their own personalities and have interesting things to say. This is truly one of the more relaxing parts of the game. But for more on town building, let's hear what Komineku has to say.
Rebuilding the towns is one of the main mechanics of this game. It also is one of the trickiest to get the hang of, and do correctly. Your main goals in rebuilding the town is to get 1. All of the villagers and their belongings back, 2. To put all of the villagers and belongings back in the right houses, and 3. To fulfill the requests of how the villagers want the town to be rebuilt. The first 2 objectives are easy, and in fact you need to do a fair amount of rebuilding in order to progress in the game. However, fulfilling requests and getting 100% on all 3 can be hard. And by all 3, I mainly mean the last group, requests. The requests make rebuilding the town like a puzzle, because you have to place their houses in just the right spot, next to the right thing, or in line with the right objects. It can be kinda hard to describe what I mean unless you actually see it. And while it can definitely be hard to figure out, it definitely is really rewarding to do it. After all, you get something for doing so, whether it be a new combat technique or a new weapon. One real quick tip I have is if you're close to 100% but not quite there yet, and you keep rearranging everything and you still haven't gotten the 100% and you're not sure why, try beating the dungeon connected to the town first. You might find that after doing so, you reach 100%.
If you're into RPGs or are curious about Dark Cloud, I'd highly recommend it. And that's coming from a guy who's never liked RPGs and has over 50 hours into this amazing title. It's Dark Cloud for Sony PlayStation 2.